Hi, I'm Manny Howard. This is Salon Talks. Today I'm here with Will Horowitz, the author of Salt, Smoke, Time, and the owner and executive chef at Duck's Eatery and Harry and Ida's Meat Supply Company here in New York. What a book this is.
Thank you.
The thing I love a lot of things about it. I love the combination of sort of manifesto, heartfelt manifesto, and DIY. You know,
Yeah.
There's a great combination. How did you come to? What were you thinking when you started this project?
You know, it's difficult, and I relate to the same way chefs start doing a restaurant. They have, you know, it's a culmination of saving up all of this intensity and creativity, and they just want to get it out. You know, and half of it might be insecurity, and half it's passion.
Right.
But at the same time, you have someone was silly enough to give you a deal to do something, so you just want to get it out there.
Right.
And for me, this is a culmination of so much of my past. So it's this, you know, I got into being a chef from the DIY stuff, from sustainability, from permaculture, to learning how to kind of live and work off the grid.
Right.
And this is kind of, you know, a decade later of going down the road of being a chef, this is my circle back into it.
Right. So can you describe to me that process as you started to get into permaculture? Where were you? How old? You know, what was going on?
So, you know, I think for me, you know, I originally grew up here in New York, and I got into a lot of trouble as a kid, like most chefs and writers.
Yeah.
And I, you know, I ended up getting sent away when I was about 16 to one of these primitive survival high schools.
Right.
And in the woods. And, you know, that kind of led me down this adventure for years of just being obsessed with studying, you know, Native American traditions and indigenous traditions from all over. And really I had this desire to be able to live off my own two hands.
Right.
And that led me down a ton of different directions, and it eventually led me to Naropa University in Boulder, Colorado,
Right.
where I studied permaculture and this art form of how do we create systems by studying nature.
Right.
And so much of that resonated with me from wilderness survival and primitive survival, this idea of being able to see natural ecosystems and patterns that are already going on in nature and create lifestyles out of them.
Can you describe seeing natural lifestyles and patterns? I mean,
sure, absolutely.
Well, patterns, life cycles.
You know, for me, it's just this idea, and this kind of takes us down a strange direction, maybe. But you know, it's this idea that we're, you know, able to really walk in the woods or even in the park here and say, you know, how are these different faunas and trees and topsoil? How is this all working together? You know, what's doing the composting here naturally? What grows best in the shade here? What grows best, you know, when it has sun before the leaves hit in this time of season?
Right.
You know, what is the unison and symbiosis? And then how do we take those examples and apply it to maybe a garden at home, maybe, you know, a restaurant, maybe a food system, maybe an entire world?
Right. Well, how do you apply it to a restaurant?
We're still trying to, it might not be possible in New York City, to be honest with you. But, you know, we try. And for us, you know, at the restaurant, at Duck's Eatery, has been a great example is that, you know, we've decided that we want to build a business that, you know, hopefully worked with good farms, but also lent itself to be accessible to the community we live in. In order to do that, a lot of it was picking up other people's waste. Uh-huh. So using scraps, using the offcuts that nobody wants, using vegetables and trying to transform them into really stars of the show and their own kind of beautiful art form in itself. And really just trying to take our own direction, but all based on these old ideas of not letting a single grain go to waste and really adding value to whatever we can get our hands on.
Right. So, and when you talk about scraps, other people's scraps, you're talking about offal, you're talking about...
Yeah, all the above.
Duck's feet.
Yeah. I mean, I think when we opened Duck's Eatery, and Duck's Eatery, it was actually named after somebody. It's not like a duck-centric restaurant.
Right.
And when we
Some guy named Duck?
Yeah, when we first opened, we actually got a lot of people angry because people would come in expecting it to be like the IHOP of duck. And the only duck we had on the menu was actually a duck tongue salad for the first 6 months. So that didn't go real well. But I think like.
So what did you replace it with? You got.
I mean, the first time we made her, we have we get whole ducks now from our friend's cousin farm around Long Island, and we break them down. We use every part possible. But I think the first time we started really making our name at ducks was we had some butchers who had some leftover goat necks and lamb necks, and so we started taking those. And before that, I had spent a lot of time living in Nepal, where a popular dish in Nepal or northern India or Pakistan is paya. Right. Which is a goat or lamb feet in a curry stew. Oh, wow. And so when we first wanted to do that, I run the restaurants with my sister, and that was a hard no.
What did you
And so...
Wait, necks are okay, but feet are not?
Well, it's the funniest thing. So, even with the food culture the way it is right now in New York and really internationally, where you can serve people any type of weird thing under the sun, for at least a lot of Western culture, the thing that we haven't latched onto yet is textures. Mm. So I can serve you any insect you want and probably have like a great article in Eater about it. Right. But if I dare to serve you something that's gelatinous or fatty, it's like it's immediate off. So like feet, it's still difficult, like unless we're like deep frying it in Rome, it's like it's not like necessarily something that people want. For me, it's like was my ultimate like hangover food for years. Yeah. But so the neck was incredible because we were able to get it inexpensive for one, still from good farms. It was originally they were just stewing it up or going to dog feed, right? And it has a lot of meat on it. Anyone that loves making hamburgers at home or something like that knows that they get the neck. The neck's one of the most fatty but also most flavorful cuts of meat. Right. So the goat neck and the lamb neck had a ton of meat. So it was easy for us to do. And it's about a 3-4 day process. And within a couple months, it was, took off on TV and stuff. And that was really one of the reasons that the lights are still on right now.
That's right, the goat neck.
Yeah, there's a goat neck, yeah.
And you've sort of pivoted away from meat as this sort of focus of the restaurant, too, of late. Is that right?
We have, definitely. And also, with the goat neck, listen, you do something like that, it's the same difference as, when we see the rise of, like, skirt steaks or something like that. Right. They become so popular that all of a sudden that $2 a pound when you go Whole Foods or somewhere is now like $18 a pound, you know? So you got to be careful what you share with people and what maybe you keep in your own house. But with that being said, we started at a certain point selling so many goats. I had this kind of Gary Larson cartoon in my head of like a bunch of like necklace goat farms like laying around in the field. But it's so we're constantly moving, and we constantly have to switch up and constantly have to see what's next, what's the different, going to be different. And a lot of that is curiosity, but a lot of it's survival, to be honest, you know, as a small business. And so right now, actually, the big focus for us has been vegetables. In the past 2 years, I should say, I've spent trying to work on ideas to add value to seaweed. And that's been a big one for me, too. But so really right now, we're shifting gears, and not just because of cost, which does play a factor, but also just sustainability. And it's not that we don't want to eat meat, we just want to reduce the amount we eat, and we want to create more variety in general.
What are the food costs on seaweed, on the high-end stuff like dulse? Like, is it getting close to?
It's still,
marginal
at least for Western culture, there's a few, Scandinavian cultures, countries that are a little ahead of us for sure. But at least for the Northeast here, it's really very much still in its infancy. Okay. But we have incredible nonprofits like Green Wave by the Thimble Islands outside of New Haven. Okay. And they're helping people build more sustainable seaweed farms. And I should say also, when we're talking about seaweed, I'm not talking about the giant kombus and stuff that we're getting, and the wild artisanal seaweeds like that. Because anything that we pick wild in humanity, we're just going to fuck up. That's like a guarantee. That's going to happen. How sustainable we think it is now per population. Right. So, and we do have a seaweed history here. We actually have about 80 years of history of people farming, but really what that meant was tearing down wild kelp forests up north for agriculture in the Midwest. Huh. And so I'm trying not to do that. That's the goal.
Right.
But
so working with green, I'm sorry.
Green wave. So
green waves.
sustainable seaweed farming is interesting, and it's a simple, really, well, maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but is taking out 2 buoys and being able to set a line and be able to seed it, and we have hatcheries opening up all over helping people supply it.
Right.
And the beauty of it is it's zero input.
Right. It's harvested just like lobster traps, right? I mean,
Yeah, it's harvested like lobster traps. I mean, the beauty of it is that you're not watering it, you're not feeding it.
Yeah.
You know, you're really just going out there to check on it and make sure your lines don't get tangled. Make sure some angry lobster guy over there didn't go through it. You know, like
right.
it's I don't know how familiar you are with the lobster world, but
yeah, pirates.
it's brutal. You know, and it's tough. And you know, we talked before this interview a little bit about Long Island, right? Yeah. And, you know, we've seen the shellfish decline in Long Island over the past 20 years has been, you know, it's massacred the industry. And those rise in temperatures that helped us, you know, ignite all these, you know, soft shell diseases and stuff for lobster are slowly creeping their way up towards Maine. So we're seeing, you know, what's good right now is right in line for a devastation to the entire industry.
And lobster, in fact, migrating north into colder waters in Canada.
So we're really only a few degrees off at this point. So so with access to an industry like this, you know, I dip my hands into farming and stuff like that, but you know, my skill set right now is being a chef.
Yeah.
And so for me, being a chef is really kind of telling this story. And my story has been to add value, figure out how do I add value, and how do I translate seaweed. So right now, you know, maybe it's averaging anywhere between $2 at cheapest to about $10 a pound for seaweed. But
10's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot for sure. But it's still, like I said, just in its infancy. And, you know, this stuff only works if we can figure out how to add value and at the same time accessibility, and figure out a way to make sure that, you know, these lobster guys switching over can actually feed their family off it at the same time. And it's a tough job, but, you know, my idea for this stuff is that by using these kind of ideas that we're working on and mapping out through preservation, through smoking, through curing, through pickling, all these different things, we can actually, they're used to add value to things, to add shelf life to things, to make stuff into something delicious that wasn't before necessarily. And that's the idea of a chef these days, is if we can do that, you have the power to connect struggling fishermen and farmers to struggling restaurants, to struggling communities. And that's the beautiful sense of it.
And probably the only thing harder than being a chef is being a farmer or a fisherman.
Man, they are both hard these days, man. I mean, you're looking at these fishing communities with some of the highest opioid, you know, rates in the country. You're looking at, you know, local farmers are in the red. You know, our systems are all screwed up right now, you know? I mean, we have this idea of farming that's, you know, our small farms are mirroring giant, huge agricultural systems, and they don't function. Our fishermen are overfishing. Our restaurants are, you know, geared towards the 1%. It's just a mess.
And everything's going to the dumpster behind the restaurant.
And meanwhile, we have these, you know, generic 40%, you know, waste statistics of food going into the garbage. So it's baffling as how we got here, but at the same time, when you take a step back, it's actually not that crazy. It's actually quite simple, really, what's happening.
It's reasonable considering the stimulus, that's right. One of the other things that I really like about the book is that I mean, along these lines, it's got a little bit of the sort of survival, ist thing in here, but it's also the most peaceful book I've ever read on the topic. A lot of this stuff a lot of these conversations are very alarmist about the end and all this, you know, dramatic stuff. But your tone in this book is peaceful and generous. And hey, this is how I do these things. I want to share the information with you. The nice thing is that you source the information that you have so well. Everybody gets credit in this book for the things that you've learned. You really, as you read it, you really feel like you're grateful for the information you've learned, and you're excited to pass it on. And
well, I mean, this is a conversation. It's not a reference, right?
Yeah.
I mean, every information right now is so much more interconnected and moving so much faster than it ever has. That we are constantly learning things about these fields and how to apply them, you know?
Right.
And that's the most I could ever hope out of something like this, you know?
And when you turn from the techniques, which are all fascinating and some quite detailed,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
I mean, there's some stuff in there. Like I'm like drawing schematics as I'm reading this, trying to figure out the cold smoke, the route for the cold smoke into my salvage refrigerator, which I'm looking for one with a glass front. Like some of this stuff is a real project, and some of it is totally intuitive and really quick. Like I'm going to ask you to sort of describe this quick pickling technique. Something that you can use for all kinds of food, and something that a viewer who's getting ready to build a cold smoker can do beforehand.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, the toughest part about writing this book for me was putting recipes down. And just, a lot of my friends are the complete opposite. They're working like scientists in their kitchens, and I can't get enough of it. I love every second of it. I love being around it. But for me, we don't use recipes in my kitchens.
Right.
Even my professional kitchens, maybe for the most important things, like pickling something or curing something, especially anything that has to be shelf stable, that we're drying, like meats and stuff,
right.
That could have harmful pathogen potential. That stuff we're real serious about. When it comes to any other recipes and things like that in their kitchens, and there's thousands of them, I teach based on taste and feel.
Okay.
And that's what we do. And there's some chefs that work for me that despise it every second of it, and they can't deal with it. And I happily refer to them to one of my million friends that are fantastic.
Who like writing it
really
down?
being technicians as chefs. But for me, it's about really understanding the principles of these things deeply, and really being able to feel them and really be able to understand them. And it goes hand in hand with the farming stuff too, really being able to get a sense of what you're looking for and what you want as something. And once you learn those, and the beauty of it is that they become applicable to such a wide range of other things. Right. I care less that people are imitating something that, the recipes for me are secondary in terms of the finished dishes. Right. Great, you want to make something that's really fancy like this? Awesome. You want to just apply it to a big bowl of for your chips or something? That's even better to me. Right. Because the idea of just taking these techniques and applying them to a lifestyle. Right.
Right. But some of these some of the recipes in here, some of the plated stuff, the art in the book suggests otherwise, right? There's some beautiful looking stuff in there. It doesn't look like you just got the theory down and then dumped it on a plate. This is,
No, for me, and maybe it's my own internal hypocrisy a bit, but I consider myself an artist by trade, and sometimes my passion overtakes my, rational thought process. And I also, at the same time, as all these beliefs stand true to me, I also love cooking. I love it in its finer points, and I love creating an incredible experience for people.
Right, right. When you were growing up, you grew up part-time, or part of the time, out on the North Fork. Yep. In Long Island, where you mentioned earlier that seafood is really without it, you're sort of nothing. You're lost, right?
Well, it's kind of an irony that we were originally known here in New York for smoking brisket and meat and stuff like that. We were raised really on big old-fashioned New England clam bakes on the beach, and fishing, and really doing everything ourselves. Right. And that's really where my heart is most of the time.
And even with the clam bake, you bring this these great flourishes. It's a very tried and true both process or ritual and recipe, right? I mean, I think everybody either has a picture of it in their mind or not. But what you bring to it, which is the foraged element, which I'd love to talk more about, is you just add a little, suggest adding a little dried rose hip to the butter, right? And
The irony of that is hopefully my grandma's not watching this. She's
we want everybody to watch
98
this.
in a nursing home in Greenport right now, so I don't know what websites they're able to see, but she would kill me if she saw that. She would rip my head apart if she saw that rose hip thing in there. So it's that's as far as I would ever imagine taking it.
Did you like look over your shoulder when you were thinking?
Oh yeah,
putting it in, like, to make sure
just the
nobody
idea, the
noticed
thought
it?
of that would be devastating to her. So I actually have to show her the book for the first time this weekend.
Oh yeah.
So we'll see. We'll just have a thumb over that ingredient there. But
Next page. Well, she's going to be very proud, I think. That's
also, and these are, like I said, they're tried and true because that's not my recipe. It's
right.
It was my family's for a very long time, and those are the things that got me into cooking and
right.
and so on. And it's and to me that's as beautiful as any 20-course plated meal out there.
Now, did you go when you were in at Naropa? Did you go? Naropa, for people who don't know, is Tibetan tradition Buddhist foundation. Did you go from the things that you learned at Naropa and in the tradition of the mindfulness tradition and into cooking because it gave you direction, or did you?
I grew up cooking, and so I grew up, and also growing up in New York, I grew up working at pizzerias and stuff like that, and so all my friends, and with my grandma's tutelage as well, and the irony is actually my father was a cardiologist, so I also grew up eating a whole lot of crappy tofu dishes too, which actually.
Yeah.
American 1980s tofu was really rough. Now, actually, I freaking love tofu, but it's in a different style.
Put some very bad tofu on the table. I love him.
But it's I originally went to Naropa for writing.
Yeah.
I was in the Jack Kerouac Institute of Disembodied Poetics,
right?
And that was that was really a big part of my life. When I originally went, kind of got dropped off in the woods. What I took to most was all the a mixture between Tom Brown primitive survival books and an enormous amount of Emerson and transcendentalism and the whole Dial and that whole world.
Right.
And that led me into later on in life a lot of the kind of beatnik era.
Right.
And getting as it does. It's a natural, I think, transformation of stream of consciousness sort of style of writing.
Right.
And which is ironic because now I look back on Emerson and stuff and I'm just like, what the fuck is going on here? and so anyway, that led me to Naropa. And what was interesting for me is that my transition was that I saw a lot of the writers that I was excited about. Kind of move towards, like a lot of writers, a lot of drugs, a lot of alcoholism, and most of which actually attempting to transition into a lot of Buddhism at the time, and that's really the emblem of Naropa. It was also started by a famous Tibetan monk Rinpoche, Trungpa, but it was also started by Allen Ginsberg. At the same time, and when you look at like all the later Kerouac books, you see a lot of that transformation that people are trying to get into, and some of them made it, and some of them died by a train track in Mexico somewhere.
Right.
But so for me, and their writing program is pretty intense, and it didn't make me feel healthy to write, be up at night writing 50-page manuscripts and chain smoking cigarettes and stuff. And so I went into the Buddhism thing. Of course, then later on, I opened a bar. So that obviously didn't work. So, but I kind of ditched all that and went straight into the Buddhism thing at a certain point. And so the Tibetan Buddhism thing was a big part of my life there for a long time. And I wouldn't say that that's been something that I continuously practice as a religion. Right. But certainly in its core, the idea of through stillness, being able to connect to something larger than yourself is a big, core belief for me, and how it relates to our connection to the wild and nature.
Yeah. Well, it's in here. You come out of the gate, very strong with that message, and it's sort of a spellbinding beginning to a book that ends up with some beautiful recipes. It's a fantastic book. Thanks, Will.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, great to talk to you.
Likewise.